Hey, folks, welcome to the Beer Garden. This is a Sidecar episode. I am Jason. That is Brandon. Today, we're talking about planning with org charts. So, if you listen to our most recent full length episode, we gave kind of a high level overview about scaling your business, whether that's from 500 million to a million to 3 million, 3 million to 5 million, or beyond. And one of the key components that we talked about there was using your org structure or your org chart, as some people like to call it, to plan ahead and really start to map out what that looks like. So that's what we're going to dive into here on this sidecar. We're going to give you some tangible action steps, and we're really going to just try to stay focused on the primary steps so you could like go out today and start implementing this here. First and foremost, I want to just give a resource recommendation here to actually like build the org structure in, and that is Bubble, Bubbl .us. It's just a free tool you can use to build like a bubble chart or an org structure. There's lots of great tools out there, but that's a free one. It's one that I've used for many years and a good tool. But as we dive into this here, let's talk about some of the action steps that you can take. Brandon, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if you've never built an org chart, um, it's time to start. So start, start with what you have. I would just build one out on Bubble or a piece of paper or a whiteboard, whatever you want to do, and get what you have today built out. And then the real fun comes when you start to think of the future. So I would want a very clear picture of the structure of my business for 6 months and a year. Like, kind of start with that, and then start thinking of other revenue targets. So it doesn't have to be year by year. Start thinking of it by revenue instead. So if today you're at $1 million in revenue and here's how it looks, start thinking of, hey, what is this business going to look like when we do $3 million? Or what would it look like at $3 million? Who would we need? Or better said, what positions would we need in the company? So a key part of this, even though I just said who do we need, I meant to say what seats do we need, is to not think of people's names. So the exercise kind of goes like this. You think of, okay, what's going to look like at 3 million? What roles would I need in the company? And separate people from it. So like you're not in the seat of ops manager, your current ops manager is not in that seat. Because what'll happen is you'll start to write things down of what the ops manager will need to do, and you'll think, that person that works for me now, they cannot do that. They're bad with computers or something silly like that, right? So separate that from your mind as much as possible. You're not putting names in those seats just yet. And then you'll kind of want to know, how much, down near the bottom of your chart, you'll want to kind of know how much revenue each crew can produce. So you'll say, okay, it's 3 million in revenue. So starting at the bottom, that's going to be, if today a crew produces 500 grand, that's going to be this many crews to produce 3 million. And then you're going to have a clear picture in between there of like, well, if there's this many people reporting to one supervisor, that's probably too much. So maybe I need two. And you start to kind of iterate on it like that. How am I doing, Jason?
Doing great.
Okay. What else? Yeah. So think through, don't, I think of things in terms of functions of the business. So we have, depending on the size, the owner, the CEO, then who reports to that individual. You've got a operations function in your business. You've got a finance function in your business. You've got, you see that thumbs up?
Yeah.
I'll try to do that as many times as I can. So you've got an ops function, you've got a finance function, you've probably got, well, you may have a sales function in your business as well, and then supporting staff under those.
Mhm.
So think of those as your tree.
Yeah. So that first point you touched on, determine your revenue targets, right? That you're basing these org structures off of. Don't have
Yep.
to be by year. It could be like, here's what 1 million looks like. Here's what 3 million. Here's what 5 million looks like. One of the first steps after that, and I think you touch on this, but it's just like the easy one to start with is how many crews that is, right? Because you can generally like figure out how many crews, like each crew now produces, call it, 200 grand for easy math, right? Each crew of two produces 200 grand. So we have a $800,000 business right now. That's 4 crews. If I want to grow to 1.6 million, I'm going to need 8 crews to do that, right? So you start to map that out and it gets very easy. So start with your crews. What does that look like? What does the makeup look like? Then I would dive into that supporting staff. And so like, okay, well, if I have 8 crews, um, we're going to need like a production manager now, probably, because I can't manage the 8 crews anymore. So we're probably going to need a production manager at that point. And a general rule of thumb that I like to use, this is not the same for everyone in every business, but I typically like to keep it so that no one person has more than like 5 to 6 people that report to them. Like that's
Yeah,
generally like
agree
the
with that.
comfort zone that I like to try and keep it at. So if I have one production manager, I have 8 crews. He has 8 people reporting to him, right? So 8 crew leads reporting to him. You might at that point consider adding some other sort of layer there. Either it's like 2 kind of production managers, or it might be, just 2 general, like call them team leads, whatever you want to call it. But that's just a good, I think, general rule as you're kind of thinking about this. Imagine trying to like coordinate and meet with like 10 to 12 people every single week to coordinate. It's just too many for one person to handle.
I was going to say, some of these roles, as you're growing, especially, well, probably, up to even like $5 million or something, you're going to have hybrid roles that feel a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
So if you think of a huge organization, you know, like a small organization has an office manager, a huge organization, like they have a dedicated full-time person that just handles like accounts payable, right? Because they have 40 hours plus a week of work in just paying vendors and stuff, right? Whereas in a small company, that office manager is like a terribly difficult job, right? Because that individual is probably like a bookkeeper, an accounts payable, an accounts receivable. They're reporting on finance to the owner. They're dealing with HR issues. They're doing payroll, right? Like
Right.
it's like super hybrid role, right? That's what I mean is that individual has to be good with dealing with people and good with dealing with spreadsheets and QuickBooks or whatever. So that's okay. That's just kind of how it is. And you either contract some of those things out, which is totally something you can do, or it's going to be a hybrid role. And same with an ops manager. An ops manager, maybe
Yep.
they're doing sales and things like that when the company is smaller, and the bigger the company gets, as soon as you have one task or area that hits that full-time amount of work, well, now you can hire someone specifically to do that, and that's why that happens in larger organizations.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point. The last step, once you're kind of happy with where you've got all of your org structure, like the different roles, the different functions of the business, is, in my opinion, write out the high level deliverables, or you might call these accountabilities for each of those roles. And I say high level, meaning like you could spend a lot of time diving into like all the things this person does. I wouldn't recommend that here. This is just like production manager. They're responsible for executing the production plan on target. Like that's their high level thing. Crew leader, well, you can actually put a tangible number to that because you did the math at the beginning, right? Like this crew lead is responsible for producing $200,000 worth of work this year and overseeing his crew in doing so. Like high level accountabilities in there. Anything you would add on that?
Yeah, just don't worry about getting terribly detailed, and keep it to like 3 to 5. Like try to keep it under 5 bullet
Yep.
points. you're fitting it on a, basically like a post-it note on the wall. That's what you're writing out here. It's not the employment agreement. So keep it like that. And again, remember not to think of people's names as you're going through it. Sadly, I would say, some of the people that got you to where you are today will not be able to get you to where the company has to go. And that could be your fault or that could be their fault. Either way, something screwed up. So, just in general, what got you to where you are won't get you to where you're going. So map it out on an org chart. And I think that's a great way to explain how the company works too. So slap down an org chart in an interview, like show people like this is the role we're filling. This is kind of what what the chain can look like. Here's, today, here's what we're planning in 3 years from now.
Right.
It's a really good visual tool for that type of thing, for interviews or for, take everybody out for a wings night or bring them all to the shop Monday morning, put it up on a poster or whatever, and just show them and say, hey, it's a good way to cast the company vision. The last thing you'll do is add names, right? So you say, okay, here's where we are today. Does the current person that does this, or maybe there is no current person that does that, but there's crew leaders or people that could be promoted into them. Does anyone in the organization fit this role today?
Yep.
They don't have to, but they, if you've done really well at people development, they will. So think through that. And that's kind of the last piece, is just adding names that will fit those roles.
Couple things to point out about adding names. Like Brandon was saying about the hybrid roles, this is where, like, don't be afraid to have one name in multiple seats. So one person sitting in multiple seats. You might have a person, because it's a hybrid role right now, like you don't need a full-time customer service rep and office manager. It might be that the office manager sits, or the individual sits in the office manager role and the customer service rep role for the time being.
Or
and
the
then
owner in like the sales manager role. You're
totally
the CEO and you're the sales manager, and you
Yep.
report to yourself.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you cannot have multiple people sitting in one seat. You can have them in the same type of role. So if you have 9 crew leaders, obviously, then you have multiple people sitting in a crew leader role, but you can't have 2 people sitting in one seat, the office manager role, right? Like you can't have 2 people doing that, because if multiple people are responsible for it, then no one's responsible for it. And finally, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I just pulled this up and I'll just share, actually, like we're talking about building these multi-year org structures. I'll share some that I've built here on the screen, just kind of giving you an idea. I'll walk you through it of like what we've done.
A look under the hood of ACA here.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, are they actually yours, or
they are?
Do you fake these before? Okay.
No. So these are like, this is just showing like a multi-year plan, right? So as we talked about, like here's like the dollar amount at the top. This is what it's $5 million team would look like. We've got the org structure. I've got it broken up by division. So over here you have the sales and marketing
Like
team.
function, like we were talking about.
Function, yeah.
Function
You
division.
got the production team, and then you've got administration over here. And again, I've just broken up by team, like how much revenue I know how much each one of these can produce. And then I've started to break it out based on like how many people can each manager oversee. And so we've broken it up in that way. This is like prior to adding any names or even adding the accountabilities that we talked about. Like this is just like the first kind of cut going through here. I always like to keep notes down here that I like come across as I'm like kind of thinking through this plan.
So let me pick this apart for a second. So this is exactly how this should go, right? So I look at this and I see, okay, well, zone manager 1, he has an irrigation person, as does the second and third one. Why don't you make an irrigation division? Like, and that's another way to kind of skin the cat. Or why do you have, you have a production coordinator up there with 4 zone managers. Why don't you just, have all of them be production coordinators, or have 2 production coordinators and then have each of them with a couple of zone managers and have an irrigation division, or,
Exactly. And
there's a million different ways to break it up.
you can even see in my notes up here, like potentially split these, or should say zone managers, not team captains. That's old language, but potentially split team captains by division rather than region, right? So in this model, I've broken them out by region. That's why they have a mowing, a detail maintenance, and an irrigation. The only one that's kind of division based is this enhancement zone manager over here, because they, at this point, in this revenue model, we don't need as many enhancement crews to serve all our regions, right? So there's like assumptions that are being made here as I go through and build the org structure. Whereas if you fast forward to the next year, right, we talked about building for multiple years. Now we've got
Jesus.
we've got actually the exact same structure. It's just every zone manager has an additional mow crew now. And so the reason for that is we typically sell more mowing, like to truly get up to like our capacity levels. And capacity, I mean like human capacity, zone managers. We typically have more mowing than we do the other services. So we've just added a mow crew. Whereas if you fast forward even later to like the next revenue level, now we're getting really lofty, and we're talking about, instead of having over here where we said satellite shops, right, all operating out of one central location, now we've broken into branches. So we've got the North branch. Each branch has a production manager. Each branch is doing roughly 3 million in revenue, and this is what that looks like underneath them. And if you listen to our full length episode, I can just tell you right now, if we were sitting at this $9 million mark with 3 different branches here, we would be at the very bottom of like where we would want to be with costs with our overhead.
Right.
So this is where
Like
like
you could produce 15 or something out of that structure.
easily. Yeah. And so we would be, this is where we'd be in sprint mode, right? It's like we got to sprint to that next level, but at least we're mapping out what that looks like. And we have a plan for scaling from that point on.
So cool to see a real life example of this. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course. Last thing I'll share just really quick, while I've got the screen here, I'm going to switch windows and just show what it looks like once you've got some accountabilities in there and some names in there. Typically what I do at that point, you noticed in that one that I was sharing that like I had every crew broken out. When we start getting into breaking it into accountabilities, you can see here we just have like 9 crew leads, right? Every crew lead has the same accountabilities. 12 technicians, they all have the same accountabilities. So that's just how we clean it up a bit.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Don't be too progressive and try to have a flat chart. That's what I'll say. I made that mistake early on, and it's not. You show this to your staff, and they're like, "I'm at the bottom." It's not. It's just how the thing looks.
Yeah.
Well, and you are at the bottom. You're learning.
Right.
But, yeah, it's funny when you're early on, because you bring these 4 or 5 people up with you, and then some of them naturally, they're not going to be your ops manager, or they're just not going to be able to evolve to that, right? Again, whether it's your fault for not developing them or their fault for not being able to, either way, the company needs this position filled by someone competent. So what happens, I think, is it's like, well, I don't want to show the team that, Johnny has been with me for 5 years, and that person is below this person. Like the shop person reports to the ops person, or the, however you design it. So you end up with this chart that's just like really wide, and everybody's at the same level.
Right.
Not doing anyone any favors by doing that. And don't try to reinvent it.
Totally. Awesome. Well, I think we can close out there unless you've got anything else to add.
Nothing of value.
All right. Perfect. Thanks for tuning in. We'll do more of these sidecars. And if you want to kind of go to the high level version of this and think about scaling as a whole, go back and listen to the episode that we released last Friday, where we talk about scaling to the next business size. With that, thank you very much for listening. This has been the Beer Garden. Give us a like, comment, and share, and we'll see you next time.